On December 7th, 1941, the United States entered the war that had already engulfed the remainder of the world. For America, the war years were epitomized by such heroes as Jimmy Doolittle, Robert L. Scott, and others. Our fascination with their exploits, the mystique of aerial combat, and the explosive growth of aviation technology has kept alive our interest in that period of history. Today, we are far removed from the throaty sounds of Merlin and Pratt & Whitney engines. The smell of 100-octane aviation fuel is gone from the flight line. But the danger and excitement of an era gone by lives on in the models of these World War II aircraft. Welcome to Video Workbench, How to Model World War II Aircraft. I'm your host, Chuck Davenport, Director of Publications for the International Plastic Modeler Society. For the next hour, I'll be your guide on a journey that is intended to introduce you to the world of modeling World War II aircraft. For much of that time, we will be discussing basic construction techniques, advanced techniques, and techniques for those who are considering entering competition. We'll use as our subjects examples of some of the most popular aircraft of the war years. The U.S. Air Force B-17, produced by Monogram in 1/4 scale. The Royal Air Force Mosquito, produced by Revell in 1/32 scale. The Japanese Zero, produced by Hasegawa in 1/32 scale. And finally, the Messerschmitt Bf-109 G-10, produced by Revell in 1/48 scale. To begin your journey, it'll be useful to talk a few minutes about references and resources if you wish to expand your modeling skills beyond the manufacturer's suggested finishing guide. Now, collecting books and magazines can get expensive, so allow me to suggest that you join a modeling club to share resources. You can contact your local IPMS club through your neighborhood hobby shop. Remember, hobby shops are your best source for kits, books, and detail accessories, like the ones you'll see in this video. So, always shop your local hobby store first. The next step is to thoroughly wash all the plastic parts in warm, soapy water to remove mold release agent, which prevents paint from adhering properly to the plastic. If, however, you do have a warped part, this can be removed by placing the part in a stream of hot water, twisting against the warp, and checking for accuracy. Repeat the process as necessary, but do not heat the plastic too much or you could cause even more damage. If your intention is to build a highly accurate replica for competition, then you're going to need to pay very close attention to the details. Such tasks as drilling out gun barrels, removing flash, and modifying parts are best accomplished during the initial stages of construction. Now, you need to keep in mind that aircraft aluminum is thin, but the molding process for plastic models has its limitations. In this case, I'm using a pin vise and a number 76 drill to open the ends of gun barrels. Likewise, an X-Acto blade is perfect for scraping mold lines away from plastic parts. Here, I'm using a Dremel tool and a grinder to remove plastic and thin the cowling fins. Important safety tip here is to always wear eye protection when using a high-speed rotary tool such as this. The plastic can really fly sometimes. Now I've managed to get ahead of myself here, so let's back up and cover the basic assembly sequence of any given model. My personal preference? I like to build the models just like the aircraft were actually manufactured, in sub-assemblies. Fortunately, most modern instruction sheets are geared to take you along in this somewhat logical fashion. I'll underscore the word attempt, because often things don't quite work out as we expect them to. So That's why any modeler worth his or her salt will dry fit major components to check the fit prior to gluing. An area of frequent problems is the wing or trailing edge to fuselage fit. To fix this problem, you either trim the plastic till both sides fit flush, or you shim with plastic. In either case, if you have accurate drawings, make a template to ensure the dihedral is correct. In a contest, one of the first things the judges will check is the alignment of the flying surfaces and landing gear. If these things aren't dead on, you can count yourself out of the competition. Let's begin our sub-assembly work by doing the easy stuff first. As with any other part in the model, you want to remove it very carefully from the tree using a sharp knife, and then clean off the flash. My personal preference for gluing plastic models together is methylethyl ketone, MEK. It's fast-acting, dries quickly, it's a chemical adhesive. The downside is that it's highly volatile and requires a tremendous amount of ventilation. So if you have children, you may consider not buying methylethyl ketone. In the larger scales, you'll find that the wheel tread patterns are fairly well represented. However, when you get to the smaller scales, don't be surprised if you wind up with nothing but a faceless little blob like this. So what we're going to do is spend a little bit of time just to show you how to dress these little blobs up. There are two basic types of tread that you can add to existing tires. One is straight and the other is cross-hatched. In order to do the straight type tread, you need a Dremel tool. With your Dremel tool comes an arbor. When you take the arbor, mount your tire on your arbor and screw it in there tightly. You want to make sure that as you rotate the tire that you don't see any apparent wobbling. With your Dremel tool turning at a high speed, you're going to very carefully place the point of an X-Acto blade right into the turning plastic, just like this. Move off to the either side. Make sure your knife doesn't wobble, or else you'll mess up the cut. After you've finished cutting, slow down the Dremel tool. Use a piece of 180 to 200 grit sandpaper, wet, and very, very lightly allow the turning plastic to sand the edges down. And this way you'll remove all the little plastic burrs. Once you're finished, you will almost always have one side of the tire that took no tread pattern. Use this side for the ground. The next step is to remove the wheel from the arbor. The next step is to insert a rod or dowel, or in this case, a toothpick, into the wheel, just like an axle. In order to complete your crosshatch tread pattern, you'll need a bastard file, which come in a number of sizes, or grits if you will. Select a bastard file with a tread pattern that comes close to the size that you're going to need to replicate on your tire. Mount it securely to your workpiece, and then put some lacquer thinner in the tread of your bastard file. Not too much. Put your tire down and with force walk your tire along. This will take a few passes. What's happening is the lacquer is softening the plastic and imprinting that crosshatch tread pattern in there. Be careful not to break your axle, and try not to wobble. You want to get that tread pattern squarely on the tire, not up on the edges. It may take you a little while. It took me about 35-40 seconds to get that pattern punched in there, but once done, you'll have a fairly accurate representation of a crosshatch tread pattern. Once the lacquer has dried and your plastic is no longer soft, you may need to come back with a little bit of sandpapering just to smooth out the rough edges. I wouldn't recommend a very heavy grit for this, maybe 180, 220 at the least. Back to our fairly well detailed kit wheels. If you did a good job assembling them, all that really needs to be done is to clean up the glued detail. Scrape that off. Use a little bit of wet sanding, coarse sandpaper. You don't need to worry about being too fine. Keep in mind that wheels got a lot of wear and tear out in the real world, and so if you scuff them up a little bit, no harm done. Not a real big problem. These are mosquito wheels. Now you'll notice that the mosquito wheel has transverse tread marks, and so the way to deal with that is to use a needle file and very neatly sand the tread back in. Not a problem at all. Very simple. Our B-17 wheel presents slightly different challenge. It has a raised crosshatch pattern.